Finally figured out how to unmute this, so I apologize. Now if I can go back. Maybe I won't even mess with it. So again, thanks for your time. I don't have all of you here. Let's see. I'll just go ahead since I'm unmuted. I don't want to screw this up. Again, thanks for your time. My name is Gary McAndrew. The purpose of the meeting tonight, for the people that I have not met on the board, is to have a follow-up meeting with all of the board members and Aaron as the new superintendent. The purpose is to make sure that the board and the new superintendent are all on the same page going forward. So we have what's called phase 5 of the process. And basically, in a nutshell, we try to come up with 3 performance objectives that the board and superintendent agree upon that they feel are important to try to achieve this first year. So they'll be reviewed in the June-July timeframe. And they're outside of the day-to-day operational, like the budget, those type of things. So they're above and beyond the typical operational items. So we try to come up with 3 performance objectives and also then 3 measurements. They need to be measurable so that at the end of the year, the board can determine whether or not the new superintendent has achieved these objectives. And then it's up to the superintendent to actually try to come up with an action plan. It's up to them. They have leeway of how they want to accomplish those particular objectives. I'm not sure how to get myself back so I can see all of you again, but I'm now unmuted. So questions from everyone, any questions I can answer for. Aaron and I have had the opportunity to talk about this process. So questions, maybe Aaron, I'll turn it over to you to see, get your thoughts, and then Lori also.
I thank you, Gary, for joining us this evening. I think there are lots of things that I can identify as kind of unique goals for this school year beyond the traditional everyday things. So I've got a number of ideas for what those could be, but I'm also interested in hearing what the board sees as priorities. Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so the superintendent and I have had an opportunity to talk in preparation for the meeting, and Aaron's identified 3 different areas. I don't really have anything more to add to it than that. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. Sorry, I'm texting with Laura as well in the moment, trying to get, but she's taking roll. I'm going to turn it right back over to Gary, unless you want us to go ahead, Aaron to go ahead and share that with us.
I guess, yeah, thank you, Lori. Yeah, as Aaron mentioned, it sounds like he's identified, and you all have identified some objectives. The main reason, just so the board knows, is we don't get to the end of the year in June or July, and the new superintendent thinking they're working on A, B, and C. And in reality, in the end, the board wanted them to do 3 different things. So we just want to make sure we're all on the same page, just a communication tool and a way to make sure to support the new superintendent. So they're trying to reach the objectives that the board wants them to. And again, they have to sign off on these, but maybe I'll throw it out to the board. Maybe we'll start out, it probably makes sense to have Aaron, you to list out what the objectives you've identified, and then the board can reply as to their thoughts on those objectives.
That sounds great. The first performance objective that I identified is one that we've already initiated to a certain extent, but evaluate the school resource officer program and provide a recommendation to the school board. That's kind of a short-term objective in the near 3 months. A second performance objective that I identified would be to develop and implement a long-range facility plan. Thinking about kind of longer-term strategic goals for the well-being of the school district, but to initiate that in this school year or implement that. And then the third goal would be to develop and initiate a strategic plan to advance social justice in the school district. So thinking about social justice more comprehensively and tying together all the good things we're already doing in the school district to a longer term vision.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Thoughts from the board members, or Lori, anybody, your thoughts on those objectives?
This is Brad. I think they're pretty much spot on. The only one that I would have a question about is the SRO program. Besides just evaluating it, depending upon what we discover, I think there needs to be some kind of implementation thought of that versus just, okay, now we've looked at it and I'm done. Not that you were going to do that, but I mean, I think there needs to be some kind of closure on that, because if we don't go, we either won't have a program, SRO program, we'll go with a modified one, or we're going to need something completely different. So I guess I would just like to see some kind of, something beyond just evaluating what you have already started.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, your thoughts on that?
That makes a ton of sense, I believe. If it's a 1 year thing, I assume large portions of that would be implemented in a single year. There may be elements of it that are ongoing, so that would be the only caveat I could see there. But yes, evaluate the program, provide a recommendation, and implement the results, intended direction, something to that effect. The action plan.
Okay, thanks. And so Aaron can work on tweaking that, Brad, and the rest of the board. But Brad, you brought up a good example. So it's kind of a follow-up to the initial objective. But you brought up a good point, and those sound like good objectives that Aaron has come up with. Develop and implement a long-range facility plan. So, for example, there's a number of steps that may be involved with that. And again, I don't know if anything has been done to this point or not, so I might be totally off base, but it could be putting together a facility, because I've seen these plans objectives before. It could be putting together facility groups within the district to look at the need. It could be hiring a consultant to do an assessment. But if it's a 2 or 3 year process, if it ends up being that long, Aaron would want to put at the end of the first year, here's the steps that, so that, again, bottom line is that may not be accomplished everything, but maybe 50% of it is done. So what's realistic for Aaron to try to accomplish in that facility plan on the first year? And maybe you're going to come back with it is possible to get it all done the first year, but I just want to let you know, if it's a multi-year process or objective, we need some sort of a trigger at the end of the first year to, where are we at, and are we making progress towards that long-range goal? So is that something that could be done in 1 year, or is that more of a multi-year project, you feel?
The implementation part is going to be, ongoing for many years, but I think the development of the plan is necessary to complete in this year. We have opportunities for referendum on the horizon 2 years out, and so I think it's essential to accomplish that facility plan development in this year. And so we've already got a couple things in motion, but it's going to take a lot of work between now and May, but I believe it's necessary to do that this school year.
Okay, so it is realistic to do the research or the prep work for that referendum to get a lot of that done this year. So I guess in the objective, you have a good objective, then it would be, how is the board, what will you produce so they can measure at the end of this first year to determine whether or not you're on track or not? Have you thought about that, or as a board, what would the board take as an example or evidence that Aaron is accomplishing that goal? I'm just throwing that out.
So some of the things that I would put together would be a population study and assessment of the municipalities to understand housing developments and growth trends, births in the area, so that would be some background. We would have a facility assessment conducted by a third party to evaluate our facilities. And then using those things, I would put together a report along with probably some focus groups from folks in our community to get some ideas about where they see facilities going in the future, areas of need. We'd probably also have some input from our instructional folks on the suitability of our facilities to deliver modern instruction for modern standards. And all of that would be captured in a report that would be essentially a plan that the board would review and provide direction and approval on.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? This is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sure.
Thank you. I cut out. Was this the second objective? I cut out. I heard the first one. I heard the third one.
Yes, this would be the second one. Develop and implement a long-range facility plan.
Okay. I guess I was just going to add something to that because you're talking about referendum. I know some of your emails. So I think beyond, given the pandemic, we really don't know what's going to happen with this. And the reality of the situation is I think we need to have like a plan A, B, and C. The world learned the hard way of not having these real hardcore emergency plans for these these events that have occurred. And I think education's really going to drastically change. I think from the longer, especially the longer this goes on without going face to face. I mean, I see some kids really enjoying, some families really enjoying the Cooley Region Virtual Academy. So I don't even know if it's a facilities thing, is more of an education, like how do we educate beyond a facility? And so we can have a long range facility plan. But what happens if we're in the same situation a year and a half from now? I think we need to be prepared and have all of our teachers and the entire district be prepared for this situation to continue beyond current facilities. And I could literally see our school getting cut in half in terms of physical, students being in classroom. They all might be a part of our district, but they might choose to be in that virtual academy. And so it goes beyond buildings. I think it's more about preparedness. And so I don't know how you wrap that in there, but I think that should be a big part of anything over the next year, is to focus on that.
Absolutely. No, I think that would be something we're thinking about in terms of declining enrollment, but I think you identify kind of an enrollment consideration in a different way, different modes of instruction. And so that might lead to us identifying, critical infrastructure that we would want to consolidate towards, as opposed to, maybe other aging buildings that we might have to liquidate in the process.
Yeah, I mean, like one of those would be a very measurable objective, quite frankly, is to make sure every single home in this community is equipped for virtual learning. And that's obviously that's a very difficult task, but it's extremely measurable objective. And we just need to be prepared for that. I mean, the world learned the hard way, and we have to, who knows what's coming down the road next.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Good input. So any other thoughts? The first one again would be that had some input on the school resource officer program, facilities. And the third, talk about the third, how you would measure that, Aaron, as far as the social justice.
Yeah, so the key this year would be to develop and initiate a strategic plan for social justice in the school district. Obviously, this is a topic that is ongoing forever. There will always be issues that relate to social justice that we will have to work towards. Some of the elements of that plan that I would see would be ensuring that our staff as a whole has the knowledge, dispositions, and skills to address social justice issues at the classroom level, the district level, the building level, the community level, assessing our curriculum and creating engagement through our communities. And then also at the looking at our policies, procedures, so there's wide-ranging places to look for social justice issues throughout our school district, and it would encompass all of those things with opportunities to add on as we move forward, knowing that we don't have all the answers yet.
If I may suggest, the one thing I think I would add into your list, and I'm sure you're probably thinking about this too, but it's also financial. So in what ways are the school district putting money from the budget towards social justice efforts and equity and diversity?
Absolutely. Thank you, Shondell.
I would only
Other thoughts from the school board members on the three performance objectives that Aaron is proposing?
The only thing I would add to that is because, as you point out, Aaron, this is social justice is ongoing. So in order for us to assess at the end of the year whether or not an objective has been met, I would just encourage you to think about one or two specifics so that we can do an assessment of that. That is all that I have for that.
Okay. Any other suggestions or thoughts?
One
So
pointed
if
out.
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to read Juan's statement. Do you want to take the lead or do you want me to?
Go for it, Laura.
I was just going to say, Juan said, good point, Shondell. It is to be action taken, not just a plan. What are the specific actions to be taken as a district, and how do we bring the voice of underrepresented populations to bear on decisions made?
Absolutely, and that would be included in the action plan that I developed. The goal is just a simple sentence, but the action plan will have numerous lines of effort to accomplish that goal. And I think to Lori's point, there will be a number of things that will be accomplished within this school year that could be assessed along with the general plan being produced.
Yeah, so this could be an evolving document. So when Aaron, what Aaron will do is he will put in writing and include myself on the board, the objectives and how they'll be measured, and it's really up to him, and he'll come up with those action plans. But typically, you will measure this at the end of the first year, but ongoing, that doesn't mean these three objectives stop, next June or July. If you'd like to continue them, they're kind of an evolving. They're evolving objectives, really. This is kind of taking a snapshot of where you're at after the first year. But we're not expecting Aaron to have something all done right now. But in the next 30 days, if he can put these in writing and send them to the board and make sure the board, if you have any objectives, let them know as soon as possible, or suggestions. I don't say objectives, but maybe suggestions. But it sounds like everyone is on the same page, and obviously these are. They're not easy to accomplish, so it'll take some work. But the big thing is to make sure everyone is on the same page and that they are realistic for Aaron to accomplish these goals too. So are you comfortable? I need to throw this back to you, Aaron, because ultimately you have to sign off on it too. Are you comfortable with the three objectives and the input that the board has had so far?
Absolutely.
Okay. And the board, any other comments from that you may have? I apologize. I can't see anybody. I was finally able to unmute mine, but I can't see anyone. So that is really mine was just a small part of that. That's really what we're trying to accomplish is. So if Aaron will put these in writing and email the board, and maybe just email Lori initially and she can forward it on to everyone to make sure we're on the same page, and then get your action steps in there when you can, Aaron. That's really the intent of what we're hoping to accomplish anyway tonight.
I was just going to say thank you, Gary, for leading us through that work.
Pretty short and sweet. Again, Aaron had a head start to it, but again, the main thing is just to make sure everybody's going the same direction, and trying to help each other out. So I apologize by muting and not being able to see everyone, but I thank you for your time. I'll let you guys get into the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
All right, board members, we're now going to transition over to the regularly scheduled board meeting. And as mentioned, Laura has recorded the roll for the workshop, but we are officially going to verbally go through the roll now that we've entered into the regularly scheduled board meeting. So that said, Laura, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Como?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Here.
Mr. Jimenez? Says he is here. Ms. Leahy?
Here.
Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Korberg?
Here.
Mr. Spivey?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Thank you.
So a quorum of the Board of Education is present. The regularly scheduled meeting of September 21st, 2020 is called to order. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move to approve
I'd
the
like to make-
agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board. A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the agenda as submitted, unless there is a motion to amend. Hearing no motion to amend, we will have a roll call vote. Ms. Steigerwald?
Ms. Como?
Aye.
I see Mr. Jimenez says aye. Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Mr. Turner? Mr. Turner? Thank you. Dr. Cooper-Stoll?
Aye. So tonight we do not have any public speakers registered to speak, so I will ask if there are any consent agenda announcements.
I believe just one from Mr. Harsey regarding a recent hire.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Engel, and good evening, board members. I just want to point out one of the HR approvals this evening, the recommendation for hire of Kelly Schmitz. That might be a name some of you recognize if you've been around the school district of La Crosse, or quite honestly around the Cooley region of education. She was a former reading specialist for the school district of La Crosse, but has also been teaching at UWL and Viterbo, and 23 years of education experience, and most recently has been a supervisor of instructional services for the school district of Holmen. This position is available, our supervisor of educator readiness position, because Rob Tyvel has officially retired as of last Tuesday, September 15th. So if gives us great pleasure, we've been going through a lot of different committee processes for the hire of this position, the recommendation of this position. We are excited to bring Kelly on board. Should the board accept our recommendation this evening, Kelly's first day with the school district La Crosse will be October 5th. And that's all I have. Thank you, Dr. Engel.
Thank you, Dr. Harsey.
All right, so the consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. Are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda? All right, so I need a motion and a second, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Second.
So with a motion by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como, the items on the superintendent's consent agenda are approved as presented. And Ms. Steigerwald, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Como,
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez, thank you. Ms. Leahy, oh,
Looks like we
I think
lost
she hit
her.
the wrong button. Okay, we'll come back to her. Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
Mr. Korberg,
Aye.
Mr. Spivey,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll.
Aye.
Did you not
Just
see Ms.
checking my
Leahy?
microphone.
Hey.
You're good.
Works.
Oh, there's Ms. Leahy.
She back?
I'm back. Aye. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe tonight is just, one of those nights where we're having a number of technical challenges. We're going to get through it together, though. All right, so we will now move to the approval of the board consent agenda. If I could get a motion in a second, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the board consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, so unless there are any items members want to remove, we've got a motion from Mr. Korberg. We got a second from Mr. Turner to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented. We will attempt another roll call vote.
Ms. Como,
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez,
Aye.
Ms. Leahy,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
Mr. Korberg,
Aye.
Mr. Spivey,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll.
Aye. All right, so now we're going to move down to matters that are reserved for board action, and we're going to begin with a resolution regarding the 2020-2021 project search 66.0301 cooperative agreements.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution regarding the 2020-21 project search 66.0301 cooperative agreement.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the resolution regarding the 2020-21 project search 66.0301 cooperative agreement. Is there any discussion or questions among the board members?
I'd just like to say this has always been a great program in our district, and the cooperation that we're able to do with the Holman School District is wonderful. I've heard a number of presentations about this, and it's a wonderful program for students to be able to learn life skills and get them working in our community. So it's a great program.
Agree. Thank you, Mr. Korberg. Any other questions or comments from board members before we move to a roll call vote? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Como,
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez,
Aye.
Ms. Leahy,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
Mr. Korberg,
Aye.
Mr. Spivey,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll.
Aye. The remaining items that are reserved for board action tonight have to do with our monitoring report templates. Before we turn to those, I thought it might be helpful because we have some new board members just to take a quick second to put these in context for the evening. So all of you know that we have been in the process over the past year of transitioning to coherent governance. That's something the board voted on last fall. What that means the first year is that there's kind of a two-step process for beginning the actual work of monitoring and assessing these reports. It's two-step because the first step, which is what we're currently in, is to essentially approve the indicators, interpretations, etc., that the superintendent is bringing before the board so the monitoring can actually begin and we can assess that. So for our new folks on the board, this is not something that happens every year, although certainly, you know, we can review once the evidence is actually presented, we can certainly have conversations about how those could be changed in the future. I don't want to imply it's always set in stone. It's just that this is an extra step this year. So I just wanted to provide that context. So these templates, as Dr. Engel goes through them, are simply a way for, he's showing us what evidence of compliance would look like and how they would assess that. With that, we'll get into 8.02, which is the operational expectation OE1, global operational expectation. Mr. Korberg, you're muted.
Luckily, I didn't hit the receiver and take me off. I'll make a motion to approve the operational expectation OE1 global operational expectation monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg, and I think I heard Ms. Como first, to approve the resolution regarding the I'm sorry, I just skipped to the other, to approve the operational expectation OE1 global operational expectation monitoring report template as presented. So with that, we'll open it up for discussion. And Dr. Engel, I didn't know if you had sort of wanted to say a few words about it first, or I can turn it to you.
I would first say that I am entirely open to feedback through this process. You know, this is an important step for the school board to identify how you want your policies to be monitored. And as this is my first experience with this, I don't come with a large amount of expertise. And so I am interested in feedback so that we can make these monitoring documents as good as possible the first time around, so that they're useful this year. So I would just start by saying, well, these are action items, you know, for this board meeting. If, you know, there's still some work to be done, do not hesitate to table them for the next meeting so that we can ensure that they're done right this first time around. I won't take any offense. If you have questions or concerns about elements of this, I want to make sure that we get it right. The other thing that I would offer is that throughout these monitoring reports, there are examples of evidence listed, and these are by no means exhaustive. At the same time, you want to understand what we could produce that would allow us to hit those indicators. And you also might want to dictate, hey, we want to see some of these things for those indicators. That being said, you know, that single sentence or a couple of sentences will not be the sole amount of evidence you're provided. There will be a cover sheet or a memo or a document or a report or survey data that will outline all that evidence that is indicated there. So just two pieces to think about as we go through these. You know, this first one is really the superintendent's going to do all the things right. And so how do we, you know, capture a couple of indicators to ensure that, you know, we're doing the right things broadly.
Thank you, Dr. Engel, for that. And just to add to that, however, once these are approved by the board, these are the indicators we're agreeing to, at least for this first year, in terms of the monitoring. Mr. Jimenez, did you have a comment or question?
Thank you for noticing. Yes, I did. I'm guessing that in some of these, Dr. Engel, it could be the lack of evidence that is showing that we have met. For example, just looking at measure indicator number 5, district employees are terminated due to unethical, illegal, or unprofessional conduct. If that doesn't happen, then there would be nothing to report. Is that correct?
That is correct, in which case I would provide a memo that would indicate that we've reviewed our records. There are no employees that were terminated for these reasons, and I would submit that to the board as evidence.
That's what I figured. Thank you very much. The other question I had is, if these are not all the evidence documents that we could use, I mean, obviously this is the first time around, so we got to give ourselves some grace here. But it may be, and I don't know what you think, Dr. Cooper-Stoll, about having example listed in front of these to just show that these are examples of what could be produced. I think we need to be more explicit in our evidence on these, but like I said, first year around, it may be just give ourselves some grace, leave it alone, and then after the first year, we can determine what we need.
I think that, thank you, Mr. Jimenez. And Dr. Engel, feel free to weigh in on this as well. Much like there are elements of coherent governance that have been a challenge for the board, I imagine that there are elements of coherent governance that have been a challenge for the administration. I shared with Dr. Engel in a meeting earlier today that, for some of these things, like the evidence is clear, it's quantitative, it exists, and it's just a matter of attaching it. There are other things that are a little bit more of a challenge there. I don't disagree with, in fact, and wholeheartedly support the notion of generosity and as we go through this first year. And second, your point, Mr. Jimenez, that there are some things that we do want to be explicit about that we want to see. And this is going to be a learning process for all of us. So in fact, part of the conversation the superintendent and I've had is, when for things that have no evidence, what's the best way to present that to the board? Dr. Engel, do you have comments on that, or?
You're going to want something that demonstrates there's no evidence thereof. So I think a lot of that gets to like a report or a memo from the party concerned. So if one of the things is no violations of the fire code, that would be something where I would have Mr. Ledvina submit some documentation maybe of successful fire code reviews, that shows that we've done things right, but also a statement that indicates to his knowledge, to the greatest extent possible, there are no violations of the fire code this year. So part of it would be a statement from the person most closely responsible to that issue. That we would ask to make a statement verifying that was the case, as well as providing what evidence we could for positive examples of doing the right thing.
I also want to be clear, I'm not trying to impose, right? I mean, this is the area of the administration that gets to decide what the evidence is. So I take it as just ideas and suggestions, but not necessarily anything more than that.
Although I will say, to be clear, the board has to decide whether or not this is a fair interpretation. So to your point, Mr. Jimenez, doing that with a little bit of grace and kindness, I think is a good guidance. Yeah. Dr. Engel, do you want to say anything about what's coming before the board in terms of the complaint process that's referenced in this particular one?
Absolutely. The complaint process is a policy that, to my knowledge, has been in review for a while, but is not updated and posted on our website at this time. And so that is one of the critical element for any number of these measures to be valid. We need to have a high quality, logical complaint process that is readily available to the public and publicized well, so that people know that when they have a formal complaint, how to move through that process. We have, dozens of requests for information or various complaints, in a week that we deal with through normal channels and help people resolve. But sometimes there's formal complaints that kind of go through the chain of command, and If an individual's requests are not satisfied, they would want to fill out a formal complaint so that we can track that and ensure that their concerns are properly heard and documented.
Is this an area where potentially getting that information from a third party, not trying to impose a budgetary implication here, but having a third party providing that information as opposed to an internal document might be a benefit?
I think for some areas, third-party audits are very handy. I think the budgetary area is one where we have always used that. It's required by law. I think for some areas, it may be more difficult, practical, or it wouldn't necessarily, generate the results you would want. It would take such an intense, intermeshing with our normal everyday working.
Yeah. It might be more work than it's really worth. But I just think, like you said, financials, I get it. Third party is required by law, but there may be other areas where a third party could be beneficial to try to show some transparency and some. It's Monday afternoon, so I lost my words. So I'm just gonna be quiet now.
Yeah, I think like fire code inspections, those things where we have third parties, we can attach those reports and it will demonstrate that we have accomplished that measure.
Are there other questions or comments about the template for OE1 from board members? So I have a couple of things that I've communicated here, which is that in the definition of terms, I have asked the superintendent to address the definition for safety. It refers specifically in this policy to physical safety, but we know, especially when it comes to students from historically marginalized groups, that can go beyond just physical safety. And also for measure 2, I've just asked for some some clarity on what significant means. So either having that, quantified or qualified. If those two things are addressed, then what I would like to suggest is that this go to a vote for the board with the understanding that those two things will be addressed. If that's the case, I have no problem not tabling this one and moving forward with it. Any concern or question about that on the part of board members to have those two things just further specified?
Excuse me.
Sorry, I was gonna say I appreciate that, and ditto. If it's fixed and we don't have to table it, that'd be great. But if we do need to table it, I think we table it and bring it back.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey.
I'm thinking that the board should vote on the final document, and so it may preclude us from voting tonight until we have that. I'm kind of on the fence, but I'm just thinking it probably would make more sense for us to vote on the final document, because if somebody has a concern with the definition as it comes forward, how do we go backwards without having a rereading, etc.?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do think there's a couple of examples with policy where we've had just some minor changes like this. However, and we've said, okay, if you change them, we're okay with it. But if board members do feel like they want to see that final document, I don't think that Dr. Engel or I have any problem with tabling that. But I'd like to, hear, get a consensus on that from the board. Juan, are you making Mr. Jimenez, are you making a motion to table it?
No, just specifying a point of view.
Is there any board member that wants to make a motion to table it? If not, we will move to a vote. Dr. Engel, are you agreeing that you will address those changes if it goes to a vote?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, hearing no motion to table it with the understanding those changes will be addressed. Ms. Steigerwald, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, I think it would probably be good for the permanent record to have a specific motion on the exact changes, just since there are going to be changes to record that.
Okay, so would you like me to make a motion to approve as amended?
Yes.
Okay, I am making a motion to approve with them as amended. Are there, with those amendments, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Steigerwald, is we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Was that Mr. Jimenez that seconded it?
You got it.
Thank you. Ms. Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korber?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Mr. Turner? I don't believe we have Mr. Turner any longer.
Aye.
Oh, are you there? Oh, are you on the phone? Okay, thank you. Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. Okay, the next one we're going to move to is operational expectation OE2, emergency superintendent succession.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the operational expectation OE2, emergency superintendent succession monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the operational expectation OE2 emergency superintendent succession monitoring report template as presented. Are there any questions or discussion about this template?
I think the only thing I would say is I would reiterate my comments to OE1 throughout all the OEs. And instead of having to say it all the time, I just will put it out now.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Other questions or comments on this particular monitoring template? Okay, then can we get a roll call vote on that, Ms. Steigerwald?
Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. All right, the next one we have up is operational expectation OE3, treatment of community stakeholders.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the operational expectation OE3 treatment of community stakeholders monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the operational expectation OE3 treatment of community stakeholders monitoring report template as presented. So we'll now open it up to questions and comments from board members. All right, questions or comments? Okay, so I have some on this particular one. And I think this just gets at, again, some of the challenges of measuring some of these things as Dr. Engel and I have talked about. For example, in the case of, zero evidence, as Mr. Jimenez brought up before, would it be better for that particular that evidence to appear as opposed to process? Right now, a lot of the process is in the evidence as opposed to the actual evidence. So as Dr. Engel mentioned earlier, in some of these cases, there would be a memo or something that would come to the board to show no evidence. So my question to him was just whether or not that's what should appear as evidence as opposed to process. But I do understand the importance of the board having some examples of what that might look like. An indicator in 3.2 indicator 2, I just was looking for some qualification on what was meant by fair and timely. So that's just another place where we could have a little bit of, either qualified or quantified. 3.3 indicator 1. Let's see here. Let me just make sure I have that particular one in front of me. Yeah, so this particular one, so OE 3.3, respect and value individual differences of opinions here. One of the things that the board did for the first time last year with our linkages, and I know in some ways we put a pin in that right now with the pandemic, but we had a specific linkage where we reached out to our equity stakeholder groups in the community. And that's something I would certainly want to see continue. And I know it's important for the superintendent to make sure we're applying an equity lens to all of these things. And so those equity groups that were part of that conversation, I think would be important to include there. In 3.6, again, there's just this question of what is meant by valid there. And then finally, the conversation we had about 3.6 right now in this monitoring report reads specifically as having to do with open records request. And we know there are other kinds of requests that can come, but also to Dr. Engel's point earlier, I get that it may be difficult to assess all of those various forms, but I am curious to know what the board thinks about whether or not there are other forms of requests that would be important to include here. And maybe you don't, but this is the opportunity for the board to weigh in here.
I think you bring up a good point. I guess when I read OE 3.6, the superintendent will respond to requests for information, my mind went straight to open records. So I had not considered other avenues, but this may be, again, another area where it'd be good to give ourselves some grace and see where we are at the end of the year and see if there are other opportunities.
Other thoughts or input on that from board members? Again, this is where we have to kind of say we're in agreement with this interpretation, and that's specifically what we're going to monitor here. Okay. So with this particular one, since so many of the, again, there was a heavy focus on process, I'm okay with moving forward with this on a vote and not tabling it, with the understanding, from Dr. Engel that, again, in the end, it's not going to be process, but what, some kind of measure of exactly what the outcome was, even if there was no evidence there. So can you please confirm that before we go to a vote on this one?
Yes, absolutely. The results that will come back, the evidence that's provided will match the superintendent will, whatever that may be. And I think the indicators generally get to that. I think the evidence is where it feels a little bit like it's process as opposed to, quantifiables. And so there will be a memo, there will be, evidence that indicates that we have met that expectation.
Thank you, Dr. Engel. Dr. Steigerwald, can we please have a roll call vote?
I am way too many years away from a doctor.
Honorary doctorate.
Okay. Ms. Como.
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez.
Aye.
Ms. Leahy.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye.
Mr. Meyer.
Aye.
Mr. Korberg.
Aye.
Mr. Spivey.
Aye.
Mr. Turner.
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll.
Aye. All right, next up, we've got OE 6, financial administration.
I'll make a motion to approve the operational expectation OE6 financial administration monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
A motion, has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the operational expectation OE6 financial administration monitoring report template as presented. Are there any questions or comments about this template? Okay, the only question that I had about this particular one is just that there's I think a couple places where it referenced in terms of evidence a random sample. So I had inquired of Dr. Engel whether or not that meant a true a true representative sample in terms of statistics, or whether just a general sample. And I would just like to have that qualified, just so that when it comes back before the board, we know and can sign off on it. So, for example, if that just means like on a Tuesday in this month, all of those receipts are going to be, evaluated, that would be good to have, because, random sample can be different depending on the context. And I have no problem moving this to a vote with the understanding that we can just have that specifically qualified. And if it's not a true random sample, just the specifics about how that will be assessed. Any questions or comments from board members?
So Lori,
Yes.
that's based on usually our audit. The auditors will take a random sample of receipts or bills or payroll, and to see if they are in compliance.
Yeah,
Yeah, so what I'm asking for though is just a sentence or so about like what is the scope of that. Because again, I don't know if I'm that as clearly as I need to, but again, it can mean how you measure that can mean different things in different contexts.
I think I follow what you're saying, Dr. Cooper Stoll, but I also understand where Patty's coming from. We don't know. The auditor makes the determination without the institution knowing itself. So maybe to kind of find a middle ground here, would it be that a random sample as determined by the auditor?
I have no problem with that, but I thought, unless I'm wrong, there was at least one place where it was indicated that sample was going to take place this spring by the school district employees.
Do you know which one that was, Lori?
Yeah, let me just take a quick, I got it in front of me here. Yeah, so for example, on OE 6.2, the evidence, which I think is right on, is 95% of purchase of items with an individual cost above $5,000, blah blah blah, as measured by a random sample review of high dollar purchases conducted by the business department. That doesn't say through audit. To Mr. Jimenez's point, anything that can be referenced by the audit, like totally no problem. But things that are going to be done internally, I was just asking for a little more qualification about, does that just mean completely random? Or does that actually mean a systematic, sampling is gonna take place? Just again, for just to qualify it. The measure's fine, the indicator's fine.
It does happen in our approval process of purchasing that our finance supervisor, DeVita, will check to make sure if it's a purchase over 5,000 that quotes are attached. So it's kind of a daily review of any of those, but let me just see if I can clear that up for you a little bit.
Yeah, that was the only thing I was asking for.
Sure.
Was just a little more clarity, if we're going to do that in-house, what that would mean. Other than that, unless board members have other questions or comments, I don't see any issues with this template.
Okay.
All All right, Ms. Steigerwald, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Como,
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez,
Aye.
Ms. Leahy,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
Mr. Corberg,
Aye.
Mr. Spivey,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll.
Aye. All right, next up we have OE8.
Like to make a motion to approve the operational expectation OE8 communicating and support for the board monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Corberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the operational expectation OE8 communicating and support for the board monitoring report template as presented. So now we'll have any questions or discussions from the board. I would say the only question that I had about this was on 8.4. Ensure that the board has adequate information from a variety of internal and external viewpoints to ensure that informed board decisions. On indicator 2, it referenced district-wide parents, and as I shared with Dr. Engel, I don't believe that's representative of all families in our district. And so we just talked about making sure that there were opportunities, especially from families and from folks who might not, for a number of reasons, we need to be intentional about reaching out to making sure those perspectives are heard. So I just had that was just my concern about that. Any other questions or input on OE8?
I guess I would share that concern. I was just, in my mind, I couldn't think of what else to add in terms of evidence that would allow us to get that broader perspective. And so again, I think that's another area where we might have to have a longer conversation to ensure that we are meeting our social justice goals that we are setting forth for ourselves.
I would go ahead, Mr. Spivey.
I was just gonna say I would agree with that. And as I was reading through, what was that, 8.4, and just kind of some of the other documents too, I'm wondering at any point, do we specifically speak to the superintendent needing to go? And I know we say stakeholders, but can we specify community, diverse community stakeholders or anything along those lines? And I think there's either this one and there should be another document, I think, where we need to speak specifically to, are we going into the diverse communities, not just, district-wide parents, or do we need to talk about creating something similar to district-wide parents for diverse parents and diverse families? I know that was something that was talked about when I was in the district at one point. So really looking at how do we really go out and go after that information from those families that aren't otherwise represented.
I guess a question I would have is, implicitly, would that be in the definition of a variety of viewpoints? I mean, a community conversation could be with any group that is in the community. Individual stakeholders could be any stakeholder. So I guess my question would be, how explicit do we need to be? I'm not trying to push back. It's just really more of a question of how explicit does it have to be, because it could be considered implicit in the definition.
It's a great question, and that's for the board to decide. So the superintendent has brought this report to us and said, this is my reasonable interpretation how this should be assessed. And so, absolutely, Mr. Jimenez. So that's now for us to say whether or not we agree with that interpretation. And I think this is what happened and why I called the board together in June to reevaluate some of our policies, is because, you know, some of those interpretations that were brought forward, no fault of the folks who had put them together, but didn't really speak to the spirit of what the board was asking for. And this board, as all of you know, have been very, I think, explicit about the importance of equity work, about we have made sure our policies reflect that. So I mean, here's the time, right, to say, yeah, like we think that when it comes to, you know, reaching out to diverse perspectives, that we want to see, you know, evidence of that, right? Mr. Spivey, I don't know if you might have been about to say something. Again, I didn't want to cut you off there.
Oh, no, I was just responding to Mr. Jimenez's question and basically just saying, I think it needs to be more, and we need to be as detailed as possible, because historically we know that, and it's not to the fault of the school district, right? It's not saying that the school district hasn't reached out to those individuals, but it's more about saying we need to make a conscious effort to intentionally continue to reach out in multiple facets, and not just what we have historically done, which is really, hey, we have this district-wide, I'm using district-wide parent as an example. We have district-wide parents, and we expect all of our parents to show up to district-wide parent meeting. And if district-wide parents, let's say the makeup is predominantly white, which I'm pretty safe in saying that. So if that makeup is predominantly white, then what are we doing to ensure that our parents from racially diverse families, low-income families, etc., are being represented?
Yeah. And I don't disagree.
I think
Sorry.
District-wide parent people are selected by people within the school. So oftentimes the principals, and oftentimes they take somebody from the PTO. So if we worked with the people at the school who selected the people to be on district-wide parent, we might be able to request at that level to have a more diverse group of people to be able to be requested to be part of district-wide.
And I would say, in my experience, that would be a good idea, and it's worth trying. But historically, we also know that the meeting times matter. We know so many other, variables need to be looked at with that. So I think in saying it just completely as explicit or as detailed as possible to keep things safe. Not even safe, but to be daring and brave and really truly put our action, as Mr. Jimenez said earlier, making sure that we have action behind our words.
And again, I don't disagree with Mr. Spivey at all here. And I guess, and maybe I'm naive in this, but when I look at that definition of variety of viewpoints, I would expect that when we get our report at the end, when Dr. Engel wants to show evidence, that is what I would be looking for as a board member. I think that we want to know, based upon this definition, what were the variety of viewpoints received, and that doesn't preclude a group of people who may not be at district-wide parent coming together to have that conversation. So, I have no problem being explicit. I guess I'm just saying that would be my interpretation, and I think it's included with what we have. But again, I'm just one voice on the board.
So that's a good point, Mr. Jimenez. So if we play this out hypothetically, right, though, so let's say it's a year from now, and one of the reasons that we hired this superintendent is because we believe that he can lead us in this equity work. But let's just say a year from now, we get this report and there aren't diverse perspectives that are there. Unless we're clear about that and approve that, and to be, the way this works is, and then we want to say he's not in compliance. He's not in compliance, which we could, but also we haven't necessarily been explicit that that's what we want either. So this is just, again, this is going to be a learning process for all of us. But then this is why this conversation is valuable, all
Correct.
the reason for the board to bring forward like those expectations and be clear about that.
Right, and in the same hypothetical, if I guess I guess my question would be, are we asking the superintendent to be more proactive? Or are we expecting the superintendent to report on the reactive actions of the community? Right. So if nobody from the community that is from a diverse population comes to the district to be heard, and the superintendent says these are the people that came, is that okay? Or is what we're asking as evidence that the superintendent is intentionally going out and soliciting that feedback? And so, right, I mean, and again, that's where, you know, this might take a really long time to get through the conversation, but I appreciate the conversation so much, because I think you're right, Dr. Cooper-Stoll. We have to be explicit. I don't want to set somebody up for failure, but we also have to be okay with saying we failed, right? Because that is an opportunity for growth, and then we take that growth and move with it in the next year.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add that I concur with Mr. Spivey. I believe that you need to be explicit in what you say matters. And so we need to add more examples of groups from diverse backgrounds in that evidence statement to properly address that measure. And so if you do approve this policy or table it, that is, I think, an area where we need to improve on this monitoring report and add more examples of diverse groups, because right now it is not a variety of viewpoints. So that's an area of improvement on this one.
And I think another place where this has shown up and we've done a better job about applying an equity lens is through the disaggregation of a lot of the data that has come before the board. That said, and this is an error on my part, I've got 2 pages of notes in front of me, but I know that there was one template that came forward that the evidence said, you know, 95% of, I think, students who complete the survey, you know, believe that, you know, schools are safe or whatnot. But, you know, we've been disaggregating that data. To Mr. Jimenez's point, I would expect that would continue, but I would feel better if it was explicit there, because, you know, then there's no question about the fact that everything we're doing through this equity lens. Other questions or comments about this particular template, including whether or not folks do want to, since there's been some healthy discussion around this one, whether or not folks want to table this till next time and look at another version of it, or whether or not folks want to move forward. Is there a motion to table it to get a revised version?
I guess I would make that motion to table.
Is there a second to table this one so it can just come back and we can have another look
I would-
at it before approving?
I would second it.
Second it, Mr. Corber, did you
Yep,
say?
yep.
Okay. All right. So Ms. Steigerwald, can we have a vote to table this particular template till next meeting so we can have another look at it?
Yep, Ms. Como,
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez,
Aye.
Ms. Leahy,
Aye.
Mr. Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Meyer,
Aye.
Mr. Korberg,
Aye.
Mr. Spivey,
Aye.
Mr. Turner,
Aye.
Dr. Cooper-Stoll.
Aye. All right. Next up, we have OE10, the learning environment.
I'll make a motion to approve the operational expectation OE10, which is the learning environment monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
I think that was Mr. Turner was the second at the same time. So a motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Mr. Turner to approve the operational expectation OE10 learning environment monitoring report template as presented. And now we'll open it up for discussion and questions. And I'll say first off, like, so here's what I was talking about a moment ago was 10.1. The measure reads 95% of students respond affirmatively to an annually provided survey instrument indicating feelings of safety, belonging, and encouragement at school. I'm glad there's a survey being conducted, but if we are not looking at the impact on marginalized communities and we're just looking at as a whole, I don't think we're going to get as nuanced and understanding. So this would be a place where I think there, maybe a little more being explicit might be good, because this speaks to the importance of equity the board has been emphasizing. Open to, again, other questions and comments from board members here.
Well, and measure number 4 in OE 10.2 has a listing of stakeholders that seems much more diverse. So that's why I was kind of arguing the point in the previous one that it doesn't explicitly state, but here we explicitly state. So I just wanted to kind of get a feel for where the board is. And maybe it's taking some of these items here and moving them into the other OE that we just tabled. That might help us out. So, and to your point, Dr. Cooper-Stoll, yeah, I agree with you on the 95%.
Other questions or comments from board members on the template for OE10?
Is it, I'm not a board member, but is it possible to ask a question?
Yes, Dr. Harsey.
I've really appreciated the tuning throughout this process. And I mean, I'll go way back to wisdom sharing back in 2019. So for new board members, this has been a journey for, as Dr. Cooper-Stoll led off with, of quite some time, and truly an iterative process. And I feel like I'm back to my dissertation advisor who said to me, Troy, narrow is good, narrower is better, narrowest is best. And I do feel like we are getting closer to products that we all feel really, really good about. And even I think when we land on it, I remember Sun Prairie back in San Diego, the Sun Prairie School District, who I think is maybe a year and a half, 2 years ahead of us, talking about now we are editing and changing things up. So I feel really comfortable with where we are, and I think these conversations only make us stronger and put us in a better, put our district poised to be in a better position. So having said all of that, I do have just a couple thoughts and a couple questions myself. Even with the 95%, I can tell you where my head was when I wrote that was after the August 18th workshop. Linda Dawson couldn't be there with us for that one, if you remember, but Randy Quinn had kind of said, everybody wants all A's, but this model is based on reasonable progress. And so that's where, because I had talked to Dr. Engel about 100%, and I said, maybe 95%. And the idea with the student climate survey, we're actually going to launch that last spring. And I know we don't need to get into the weeds here, but we would definitely be breaking down that data so that the board would be able to see all the data broken down with great detail. In fact, this is Dr. Cooper-Stoll, you'd worked with Dr. Lahaki on the demographic. We just, with COVID, we weren't able to launch the survey. So we can definitely, and I was taking notes about the diverse stakeholder piece too, as we were talking about previously. There is one other piece. We brought this forward May 4th. And as Dr. Cooper-Stoll pointed out, a lot has changed since May 4th. And one of the things that was asked then with the data directory piece, Dr. Cooper-Stoll, you may or may not remember this, you kind of just asked, are parents aware if they feel like there was a breach of some kind, just how and who to report to? And so I kind of just took that question back and looked at some of our policies and talked to some folks. And the reality is, and this is where it just makes us stronger, just the dialogue, because the reality is it was really nowhere explicit. written down. So this is, we've got it in policy that one of the first steps is to contact the U.S. Department of Ed with a complaint. That doesn't have to be a first step. We can take care of that kind of thing in-house. And so we're adding language to student and staff, student and parent handbooks and those kinds of things, so that there's a much more clear delineation of how and who to contact to rectify issues. So I guess my point with all of this is, even in this OE, you can see that there are still more perhaps process than results, and we are trying to work on that. And we're still in contact with districts, not only in the consortium in the state of Wisconsin. So most of our templates, just for new board members, are the great work of other districts, whether we're talking about Sun Prairie or DeForest, Chippewa Falls, but we are also in contact with school districts out of Washington, Colorado, and others that we befriended when we were in San Diego. And I was in contact with Colorado just this morning, asking them about some of their OEs. So, I say all of this only as background more than anything, but I appreciate the dialogue, and I really think that the conversation makes us better for it. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harsey. And knowing I'm taking from your questions that you worked on the template for this particular OE. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I didn't know that for sure, but I've worked with you enough now that I assumed that you had, because I can kind of see your reasoning through some of this, and this is so this is a good thing. So I totally got why you went with 95%, and I think that is reflective of what Randy and Linda shared with us about reasonable progress. The only thing I would add to that is, so basically what this template implies, right, is that we agree that this school district will be in compliance when 95% of students who take this survey, indicate this. I want to know what percent of marginalized students that the administration will be satisfied with in terms of being in compliance in response to that survey. So, I think if that is, that you don't have to change up anything. I say, keep there, the 95% may be kept, but that's what I'm looking for. So now that's overall, but what specifically when it comes to our historically marginalized students? So that's just something I would ask that be included in this. And I don't think, well, that the conversation may be certainly a weighty and important conversation, I don't think it would take much to add to that. Do you disagree with that?
Not at all. I think that would be an easy addition, and obviously valuable information. Yeah.
And secondly, the only other thing on this one, I really had very few notes or questions on this template, but the other one was just this. And thank you for bringing up about this process for parents and families, to make aware if we had some violations with request of information. I see that included obviously in 10.3, but I think I've asked this question before maybe, but not in this context, but I'm wondering, since we do also allow families to make other kinds of restrictions on what information can be shared, for example, whether or not military recruiters can reach out, to students. It seems like this would be a place where that assessment would also show up, since we're talking about protecting student information. Maybe Dr. Engel has a different idea about where that might show up, but that seems like kind of a natural fit to include that there as well, because that is something that I believe as a district we're already monitoring and assessing, which is to make sure we're not violating families' requests for information not to be shared. Am I incorrect on that, or are there other thoughts that Dr. Engel or Dr. Harsey you have about that?
one of the, and I'll just jump in here. One of the things as I was reviewing treatment of community stakeholders, I think that we've got potentially a little overlap here that we'll have to iron out from 3.1 to 3.3 and that OE. But I think between the two of them, yes, I think we may have it covered and we may have some redundancy, but I think we can iron that out for sure.
I have no problem moving this one forward for a vote. Again, with the amended language that we will have some qualifier or quantifier with regards to our marginalized students, especially because we're trying to do this through an equity lens, and also an ask to see if we can include this is something that I have heard from families at times that about, again, opting their children out of sharing certain being contacted, that it may show up in different ways. So this is why I'm asking specifically about this one, because it has been brought to my attention. So, and if that can be included as a measure of some kind in that, as long as those two things get addressed, I don't have any problem moving this one forward for a vote. But other board members, do you have thoughts, questions, concerns? All right, so can we have a vote on this, Laura, with the amended language?
Ms. Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Because I needed to step out, I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to ask that. Thank you. Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
All right, the last template we're going to be looking at tonight is OE12 facilities.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the operational expectations OE12 facilities monitoring report template as presented.
Second.
All right, a motion's been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Ms. Como to approve the operational expectation OE12 facilities monitoring report template as presented. Any questions or comments?
I would simply add that this is this OE in particular is one where the evidence is examples, and there would be reams of paper attached to this to demonstrate cleaning had been done or inspections had been conducted. So there would be lots of easily accessible evidence to attach in order to demonstrate we've met those indicators.
Okay, that was my only note that I had on that one. It's just that all that evidence would need to be attached at the time. All right, any other questions or comments?
I am curious, after thinking about Mr. Meyer's questions or responses earlier today, would this particular OE be somewhere where we would add, when you was talking about the future of education and the online and, environment, not just being physical space, but encompassing so much more, would this be the OE that we would add that to?
It's a great question, Mr. Spivey. Just for clarification, that was the second objective from Dr. Engel, right?
Yes.
The long-range facilities plan. So this is the OE where the long-range facility plan would be included.
Yes, I believe it would be partly OE12, and it would also fall under instruction as well. So it's kind of a combination of those things. I think that gets to what Mr. Meyer was expressing. If our instructional strategies change and our methods change, then that will have an impact on our facilities. And so there symbiotic in a way. I don't see a particular line item, in the policy where it kind of specifically links that future thinking, so it's not explicit, I think, in this OE, but I think number one, develop and execute a facility plan that establishes priorities for construction, renovation, and maintenance projects. And then it kind of goes into some details about, thinking about the future and growth patterns. And, E, I think in particular of number one kind of gets to that. So I think it's embedded in there, but I think to your point, Mr. Spivey and Mr. Myers, it's not explicit in us like thinking about the future of education and how it will change over time. It's not a requirement to meet this, but it may be a requirement of the board.
So I like to think, I guess my recommendation probably would be to table it and really think about how what we've experienced with whole COVID-19, how we can reshape this OE. Also want to clarify, when I asked the question earlier, I knew which OE it was. I just was trying to make the parallel between what was stated earlier and this one.
So thank you for that, Mr. Spivey. I guess my only question I would offer up to the board, my only concern about tabling it is, so we have to approve these as a board for monitoring to begin. Dr. Engel, if we table it in order to incorporate that, I think that's more, that takes some time, right? I think we would probably as a board agree on that. That's why Gary was having us set these as, a year to complete. So I don't think, Mr. Spivey, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think I hear you saying and table it indefinitely. So what is the compromise we can come to in terms of making sure these other pieces do get monitored and they don't get put on the back burner while we work on this, superintendent works on that one particular piece?
Mm-hmm. And let me also, we don't even have to table it. I don't know why I'm echoing. That's weird. But we don't even table it. I think I'll trust that Dr. Engel and Dr. Harsey is going to take what we're saying and be able to implement it into that document as well. But I will explicit changes made.
Is there potential?
Everybody is echoing.
Understand. Is there a potential of changing the facilities language? Remove the word physical, because facilities are more than just the physical plant of the school district, is it not? And would that broaden it to what we need to deal with?
Well, further, the results policies take up things like curriculum and whatnot. So is that not a place where this thing, for lack of better words, future potential where education is concerned shows up? And also, you mentioned the strategic plan, developing a strategic plan, Dr. Engel, and I wonder, maybe that's where that shows up. My only concern is that I don't want to put a pin in and not monitor aspects of that OE 12 that we need to make sure we're monitoring.
I concur.
Do you have some thoughts?
I would say I think there's an opportunity to move forward with the OEs and as the OE policies as they are, the monitoring reports, maybe that's necessary to table and add in some of those elements. I would say, over this year, if we look through our OEs and, they were constructed in a bit of a pre-COVID world, and to Mr. Meyer's point, maybe we need to add in an expectation that the superintendent, look at future stuff if that's not captured in our policies already.
I would just add that if you look at OE 12.1 and the measure and the indicator says including assumptions. So maybe we need to broaden those assumptions to take in the physical and non-physical areas of safety or instructional space.
Or technology.
Technology.
And that's why I was heading towards that, removing the physical, because some of that stuff is broader. I think facilities is a broader term than just the physical aspects that make up the school district.
Mr. Spivey, I want to check back in with you in this conversation. Are you comfortable with having us vote on the template as it is, with the understanding that this is a conversation that will continue?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns about this one, this template, before we vote on that? And thank you for your feedback as well, Ms. Spring. All right, so Ms. Steigerwald, can we please have a vote?
Yes. Ms. Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. All right, we are now going to move into the information portion of the meeting. First up, we have the 2020-2021 proposed budget administrative goals.
So those administrative goals are a little bit different than in past years. In past years, Mr. Nelson referenced the strategic plan and the previous designation for results policies. And so this year I took a bit of a Cliff Notes version of the school board results policies and listed those, and then tried to identify a simple overarching administrative goal that other administrators in our school district could use to help drive their own work. So they're not wordy, they're not disaggregated, they're not particularly nuanced. They're just broad goals that I feel we should have as a school district. And it indicates all, and I mean that, in 100% of all students, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, culture, etc. So, you know, for School Board Results Policy 1, mega results, the administrative goal is all students graduate college and career ready. A lofty goal, but one that we should have nonetheless. School Board Results Policy 2 around academic performance. You could have hundreds of goals around academic performance. The one that I feel most passionately about, because I feel it's a gateway to independent learning, is reading proficiently. So all students read proficiently. And the last School Board Results Policy involves citizenship. And I will express that some of these are a bit of a stretch to fit in there, but I was doing my best to identify some things that I think are critical. All students feel like they belong. All students are engaged. And student outcomes do not correlate with student demographics. Poverty or race should not be predictors of student outcomes anywhere in our school district as a goal. So those were the administrative goals that I am interested in setting for this school year. And then as we move forward with building plans and leadership plans, there will be an alignment to these. I'm open to feedback, criticism, and clapping of support.
Well, I loved what you said. I loved all of that, but I'm wondering, my fear is by saying all, and I love the word all. Don't get me wrong, I love the word all. But there are many students in our school district that cannot communicate verbally. They have, like, saying all and then knowing about the students that we have with disabilities, I wish that they would be at that level, but we know that there are some in our classrooms that just won't be able to, and they make progress, but they're not going to be proficient. So my fear is, and I love your hope, and I'm not trying to be a downer, but I have a feeling you'll never make that all goal, and I don't want you to get like dinged for something that is really out of our control. I mean, that was kind of the hard part about No Child Left Behind, is there are children that communicate differently, that don't meet the standards of the school district. They may communicate, they may be able to exceed in different ways, but they don't follow those narrow lanes that the government has put in place. Just because you may not be an excelled person at math does not mean that you're not an amazing artist. So that would be my only fear, not criticism, because like I said, I love what you said. It's just a fear.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I debated, as I was developing these. And these administrative goals are more statements of philosophy in a way than, rigorous quantifiable goals with action steps. That is the expectation I would have of our district staff and our building principals, to establish those other benchmarks. And so while I say all students read proficiently, a building may look at that goal and say, all right, that's our goal. Right now we're at 42% proficiency. In 5 years, we want to be at 60% proficiency, knowing that no country in the world has ever exceeded on average 50% proficiency. And so we're going to exceed the nationwide or the world average by 10%. And so I think that this just provides a target for all of us to always be looking towards. And it also demonstrates that I will not be satisfied until we reach this goal, and we will continue to try everything in our power until we get there. And so, a student may be nonverbal, and determining whether or not they read proficiently may be more of a challenge for us. However, in their own way and with the capabilities that they have, we need to find a way to ensure that they're reading proficiently. And so I think sometimes it's reframing things a little bit, viewing things through a different lens. I also think it maintains our high expectations and lets us know that we're never content until we get there. So I appreciate your concern wholeheartedly, Ms. Como, but I think if we set those high, lofty goals, it ensures that we're always striving.
Thank you, Ms. Como. Are there any other questions or comments on the administrative goals before we move on? Okay. All right, next up, we've got the 2020-2021 proposed budget plan.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So this is the first time of 4 that this budget will be brought to you. And this is just an information item. However, before you have it as an action item on October 5th, it will be published in the newspaper, because it has to be published 15 days before the budget hearing. So if you go to page 3, so this is just the proposed budget plan. It's very, very much preliminary, because we do not have the third Friday count, which was last Friday. We don't have the property values. They'll come out October 1st. We don't have our aid certification, October 15th. And our private school vouchers, transfer of service, we don't know those numbers until mid-October. We also don't know our exempt computer aid, which kind of offsets our tax impact. So it's very, very preliminary. However, it is the second year of the state biennium, so there are some things that we know now that sometimes we don't know in the first year of a state biennium. So the whole budget is based on our mission of students will discover talent and abilities and will be prepared to pursue their dreams and aspirations while contributing effectively to their local, national, and global communities. So the revenue limit is what we are basing our budget on, and minus the equalized aid equals the local taxes. So a main part of the revenue limit is enrollment. We've been experiencing declining enrollment, which has a great impact on that revenue limit. We are anticipating, as of early studies, about a loss of 46 students. The 2019 to 21 state budget had an adjustment per student of $175 last year, $179 this year. And that is a base building increase. It's very important because we did not have a per pupil increase since 2014-15 previously. So the budget is developed with an estimated revenue limit increase of $343,000. And the increase is attributable to that increase in per pupil of $179. So in the school district of La Crosse, the limited resources available have been prioritized towards student instruction, primarily through low class sizes in the younger elementary grades. So on the next page, you have your budget development timeline, which we had already brought to the board. You have the board education results policies, which were previously the ends policy. Then pages 6 through 13, we have the strategic plan of the board and the strategic goals, but we know that those are going to be updated during this next year. So next year, this time, we'll have new pages there. The administrative goals on page 14, Dr. Engel just presented those to you. Pages 15 through 33 are the instructional priorities that were presented to the board on August 17th. We come to page 34, and that just talks about the state funding for K-12 education. So the numbers are based on the 2019-21 state biennium budget. The increase to general aids, there was $83.2 million in 2019-20. And $246.7 million in 2021. Categorical aids increased. The per pupil aid increased by $88 to $742 for both 2019-20 and 2021. And this is categorical aid outside of the revenue limit. Special ed aid was estimated to increase to 25.85% in 2019-20, but only reached an increase of 25.02. So estimated for 2021, the state budget estimates it to go up to 30%, but we'll have to wait and see if that happens. There was no increase to the school levy credit for the first dollar increase, and these credits go directly to the municipalities as a tax credit. The voucher funding for private schools also increased in the state budget for both 2019-20 and 2021.
Patty, interject real quick. I just want to, for a caveat for some of our newer school board members, state financing for education is incredibly complicated. Ms. Sprang and I have been thinking about this stuff for many years, and we are still surprised from time to time. You know, we're going through this relatively quickly, and obviously this is the first reading, but if you ever have any questions or want to sit down and kind of to go over it a little bit more, Ms. Sprang or I would be happy to do so at any time and try and explain some of these numbers in more depth or show some of the nuance that goes into it. it may feel a little bit like drinking from a fire hose at this moment, but know that we're always happy to talk about it in greater detail.
Absolutely. And so in the next page, 35, is the revenue limit and the equalized aid change. So our revenue limit is actually the capacity that we have to offer our services and programs. And state aid and local taxes are used to pay for those services and programs within the revenue limit. So the revenue limit, like I said before, minus equalized aid equals your local taxes. An increase in the aid does not increase our ability to spend, but it does lower the tax impact. So preliminary estimates, as you can see by the chart, indicate that we would have a slight increase in our revenue limit and also a slight increase in our equalization aid, and that comes from more funding from the state. So that's a higher level of funding. The definitions below are very confusing to most, but student membership is the residents that we are obligated to fund their education. So this means our students that are here in La Crosse and our resident students that are open enrolled out to other school districts. The student enrollment is our number of students in our seats, and that can be students within our resident students or non-resident students that have open enrolled in. So the next page is just a summary of the revenue limit increase history. As you can see, as I had mentioned earlier, we had not received an increase since 2014-15 until last year, and then this year also. So when you look at the amount per pupil, that 11,308. If you think about a 3-year average of declining enrollment, that can be a lot of money per student. So if you need to stop me at any time and ask a question, just speak up. Otherwise, we can wait until the end. The next page has our referendum history. And our capital referendum means that we've approved some debt. An operating referendum means that we are not increasing debt, however, we're paying as we go. So the next is the chart of when our debt is going to run off. And this is when we start thinking about what other projects we might have in place. And also this year, we're going to have an opportunity to refinance some of this debt. So that will be brought to the board, and that's going to save us about almost $700,000 in interest over the life of those loans. So on the next page is our enrollment history by level. Now, the following charts are all based on last year because these are the numbers we won't know until October or so. So we will update them for the final budget presentation, but we are experiencing declining enrollment. And you can see from last year that this district lost 214 students in the seats. That's very impactful. The chart shows that a large percentage of those students were at the elementary level, and then some at middle school, some at high school.
Ms. Spring? I have a question for you. Is there an ideal student enrollment? Like this is our sweet spot of where we need to be in order to ensure that we have what we need in terms of finances? Does my question make sense?
Well, it all falls into the calculation of revenue limit, I would say. You really want your enrollment to grow. And if it grows slowly, that is the best way to increase your revenue limit. Then you don't have the impact of a large decrease, nor the impact of a large increase. So schools will scramble either way. But we try to stay funded to the level of students that we have to teach. So I don't know if that helped. I don't know if Dr. Engel has anything more he would want to add to that.
Yeah, I would count up the number of classrooms and multiply by an average of 22. And if we were able to keep, 18 to 1 in our lower elementaries, and a few more in the upper elementaries and middles, and slightly higher class size in the high, that would be a way to think about what our ideal enrollment was, based on our facilities capacity. Barring that, which is, not likely, then we would want stable enrollment, whatever that may be, because with stable enrollment, we can find efficiencies. We know what to predict for future years. And so, while we may have experienced some declining enrollment, if this stabilizes, this is just where we're at. If we have classrooms that are unused, we can, move on from old buildings and we can consolidate things, or maybe if we increased for a little while but it stabilized, we could build a new building or add on wings to elementaries in order to make that happen. So the key to the right size is really stability. Anytime you're declining, you're facing issues with lack of funding, and anytime you're increasing, you're facing issues with lack of space and having to hire in ways that may exceed the local capacity.
Thank you for that. I'm just thinking that there are people like me out in the world that have no clue what an ideal enrollment would be. So I think that the explanation is very nice.
Yes, very good. Much better than I could have worded it. So as we move on.
Oh, you did great.
We have our enrollment history, third Friday, September count. And so that shows you your detail by school and by grade level. We will update that again after third Friday.
Ms. Brown,
So the next one is open enrollment history. As you can tell, in and out. This is in and out. And last year actually was the first year in a long time where we had more students going out than coming in. So we'd like to reverse that.
Ms. Sprang, Dr. Cooper still had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I could have held it to the end as well. I just had I know school districts and school boards have been concerned about third Friday count this year with everything that's going on. Since you were kind of at that point in the budget, can you talk a little bit about how that's going to be assessed right now, considering we've got the virtual academy, we've got some online learning, and I'm going to guess, but maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong, that, I haven't heard the state's going to make any, give us any accommodations for the pandemic. So what does this mean for us this year?
Yes. So DPI state is not giving us any leeway. So what they are expecting of us is to count students in the same way we've always counted students, but be able to document that we have a process in place. So for us, it means did the teacher engage with that student either on the count date or both before and after the count date? And that is the way we're going to make sure that we can count that student, is that engagement and the attendance taking of the teachers. Dr. Engel, do you have anything to add to that?
That's basically how third Friday count works. This year, I think there's a concern in a lot of districts across the state that there will be fewer students than previously, and in a way that isn't reflective of future trends either. Thus, while the impact may be minimized by a third this year, it will be an ongoing effect that schools are facing for the length of the 3-year average. So it's not a 1-year effect, it's a 3-year effect that increases for a little while and then is minimized again. Our initial sense right now, and we still have some work to do to clean up the data, is we might be down another 100 students this year. And we know that we've had some students choose to open enroll out to virtual schools because they were seeking a different experience. We've had a number of students homeschool this year that would not have otherwise. If we're only down 100 this year, I would count it probably a success and credit the Cooley Region Virtual Academy and the other options we've provided to parents. So, along with last year, we're likely to face another hit this year, and it will have long-ranging effects on our school district.
What do you mean by engage? Teachers engaging a student?
I would say that they've made actual contact with that student, have actually not just say, "Are you here?" but actually, gotten some back and forth. Maybe someone on the instructional side could explain that a little bit closer.
I think it can mean a lot of different things. If they had logged on and they were participating in a class that day, that's the simple version of that. We've had some students who have struggled to engage, and we've had teachers calling them directly. Some have even gone to houses to, try and get a visual on the kid. So I think there's a lot of different ways that teachers have tried to demonstrate that student is still engaged as best they can during this time. So I think it means a lot of different things, and particularly at the level, at the elementary level, if you're a kindergarten or a 4K student, there's no online. It's packets that we're sending home still. And so our teachers are reaching out on a regular basis. I think in many cases weekly to make that verbal contact, talk to those students. So it kind of means different things at different places, but to be honest, we're taking as liberal a meaning of engagement for these last 3 days, knowing that we want to maximize engagement always.
That's fascinating and a little scary. My son got an email from one of his teachers, and she said 50% of her class has not engaged, but she was going to continue to try to engage them, and she specifically referenced them not logging in and not communicating. That's kind of a scary. I assumed if they were enrolled in the district, even if they weren't, I guess, quote unquote, showing up virtually, they would still count, but apparently not.
No, that is the huge concern. There's not only not even enrolling in the school district concern, there's also how do we count attendance this year? And so, we've made it a clear priority of our school district to engage kids as best we can generally. But these last 3 days, in terms of Third Friday count, we have made particularly aggressive efforts.
Okay, so we'll continue. And on page 43, that is our class size counts. The orange highlight indicates the highest grade level number per class, and the blue highlighted means the lowest. So last year, our highest grade level was grade 11, and the smallest was grade 1. The following pages are our school level enrollment and projections, and they are based on our latest population study. But as you can see, our latest population study that was done in 2018 has not really come close to what we're experiencing. So we will be engaging in another population study this year. If you go to page 46, this is where we had the last study and the 3 different perspectives or projection trends. And then we match it up to the closest once we know the actual. So once we know that, we'll fill this in for the next time you see this booklet. So staffing to student ratios on the next page is based on the personnel that Mark presented to you back on August 17th. And then that will also be updated comparing our staffing on Third Friday compared to our enrollment on Third Friday. So if you skip to page 53, we now get into the financial detail. So for us, the operating funds are funds 10 through fund 29, and that is what is represented here. The operating budget revenues is is portrayed on the next pages. We are looking at our property value increase. We just were conservative in this preliminary budget. However, we have been told that we could be as high as like 6% increase in property value. That would really impact your mill rate. The other thing on here is, so we're thinking of right now, it's a levy of about 48.5 million. And this is a decrease actually from last year. We are also looking at a mill rate decrease also, but it's very early right now to make that final prediction. I will also mention that in the revenue this year, we have a new federal grant. I'm sure you've heard of it, the CARES Act, Esser grant, and that is it's intended to help both public and private schools with the unanticipated expenditures due to the COVID. So that will increase both our revenues and our expenditures by a large amount. So the next page just shows our revenue chart, and then our revenues for the past 2 years and our proposed revenues. So as you can see, our biggest revenue sources are the state and general aid, amounting to about 75.2% of our total budget. Our operating revenues, like I said, was also increased by the Esser grant, and also our device residual value. So turning in our old laptops and things of that nature because of our new Apple lease. So the next one is your expenditures by function and program. And that is about, instruction amounts to quite a bit, about $79 million of expenditures related to instruction. We're a service provider, so a lot of that has to do with personnel. And so when we have it by operation programs and by type, which means broken down into compensation, purchase services, those kinds of things, those expenditure budgets are just portrayed in 2 different ways. However, the total amount is the same. This budget is a balanced budget that we are presenting to you, meaning the revenues and the expenditures are equal. The next few pages show the building statistics, and Joe had presented that to you back in August. So if you skip ahead to page 76, it's just a little bit of a chart showing our debt service and when that will drop off so we can plan ahead. Most importantly, I'd like you to look at page 77 and 78, and this is our Community Service Fund levy. It is a levy that is separate from our other tax levies, and it has to be approved by the board separately. So the important thing about this year is that because of COVID and the governor's stay-at-home mandate, we did not spend what we had anticipated spending last year that we had taxed for. So that money will subsidize our budget this year. So just be aware that when we look at the proposed levy and it's down to $894,400, that is just the levy. That is not the budget for Fund 80, because we will still spend in those areas as we have anticipated in prior years for the year. But we need to use the money that we've already taxed to offset the expenditures this year. Also on your board docs, I attached the Fund 80 levy and what the budget is compared to by areas, so that you see that those areas are still going to be budgeted for and used for those purposes. The new one in here is Daycare Services. So our partnerships with the Y and the B and G, there are some expenditures that we will be proposing through Fund 80. So this one, I want you to really look at and ask any questions you have. If you don't have them today, this is meant for you. This whole book is meant for you to review and come up with questions to us before the next board meeting. So please scrutinize that, because this is what we will bring as far as taxing.
So, Ms. Sprang, a quick question. If we were to approve, today was the day we were going to vote, and we voted to approve the community service fund levy as presented, then we could not use those particular funds in that area for any other purpose. For example, like you mentioned daycare services, so it's $120,000. That is all we can use it for. Those funds could not be moved to another item within the community service fund, correct?
Correct. And that's important to know, that any of those funds that were left over from last year can only be used in this year for the purpose they were taxed for in the prior year. So that's why you're going to see some offsetting when you compare the budget to the levy, that those funds were levied for that purpose, and so we will use them for that purpose in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other Fund 80 questions?
What's the food pantries on there? How does that fit in the new plan?
The food pantries are there food pantries within our schools. We do not levy for that in any way, shape, or form. They actually are all supported by donations. But because it is a community service, we put it through Fund 80 because it's open to anybody in our community.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on Fund 80? Okay. I will move on. So the next one is just the fund summary. And that one I will point out to you. If you look at the revenues and expenditures by fund for 2021, that is a good place to show you that if you look at Fund 80 Community Service, that our revenues are our tax levy plus our revenues for donations for the food pantries, and the expenditures are 1.7 million budgeted. And also in this, it shows no transfer between funds. So when we have to transfer the funds from Fund 10 to Fund 27 at the end of the year to cover the special ed expenditures, that's not reflected in the revenues and expenditures here. They just kind of cancel out each other. The next one is our revenue limit, state aid, total levy, local impact. Again, this is just a preliminary estimate of our revenue limit, our state aid, and our levy at this point. We will also talk about the tax levy components. So what makes up that levy? How much is our gross levy? How much is general, operating referendum, our capital improvements fund, and our debt and community service, and then our chargebacks. Those are the dollars that were taxed, but we had to send back to the municipalities because they were either changed or rescinded, and we get to tax for those again to get that money back.
Ms. Sprang, for the levy, are we, as the old saying goes, levying up to the limit, even though we are showing a decrease in the net levy rate as an estimate?
We do levy to the max. Mm-hmm. Tax levy, components history, we went over that. School levy credits. So this is those dollars that are considered educational budget dollars in the state budget, but they do not flow into the school districts. They are actually, they reduce your local taxes. So you see that on your tax bill. And then our equalized value history. So right now, like I said, we just estimated a 2% increase. That may go higher, don't know. So we could have a substantial impact on our levy depending on our value of our property. So I guess I would say I went through it very fast. And so those of you who have heard this spiel many times before, it's probably pretty easy to understand. But to those of you who haven't, please, I encourage you to just look through it and ask questions of me. Dr. Engel is very well versed on this, and we will help you through it. So
I have a question. Just a Fund 50 food service is connected in the current situation. We get emails every week to order food. I'm curious as to how, I guess, our current food service is being utilized, and how does that impact the budget in the food service?
So we have had actually an extension of federal funding through the end of the school year, which allows us to offer meals to anybody in the district, even those that do not attend our school. So we have tried to especially want to reach out to all of our free or reduced families that really depend on this food. And so we want to make sure that we are reaching out on a regular basis so people know it's available. We do really want people to also, if they feel they qualify for free and reduced, to make sure they fill out that application regardless, because our other funding, our federal funding for title, is based on that number. So there's other areas.
And I believe they're going above and beyond, because I didn't fill out free and reduced, and they called just to make sure, did you need to fill this out? So I feel like the staff is really going above and beyond to make sure that kids are being fed. So thank you for that.
I would add that our food service program has a balanced budget this year. It has a slight decrease in the fund balance at the end, but it's survived through this whole COVID thing all right, and we'll be fine for next year as well.
So I guess a big question, are the kids that need the food getting the food, or the families? Like, I never got the same call that Don. I mean, I don't need it. Fortunately for my family, we don't need it. We're not utilizing that service. But obviously there are a lot of kids out there. So I'm glad to hear somebody's getting a telephone call, and I hope other people are as well. So hopefully they're getting fed.
Yes, we've been making every effort. We have pickup sites, but we're also dropping off for families that transportation's a difficulty, or if it's young kids that can't walk to a pickup site. So I believe our food service program and our principals are making every effort to ensure every child that needs a meal gets one.
And I just want to thank you, Ms. Sprang, for you're always a good conservative estimator, and I appreciate that for the school district. So thank you for your work.
Any final questions or comments for Ms. Sprang before we move to the next item? Thank you, Ms. Sprang. All right, next up, we've got announcements, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Como.
Well, we had our WASB meeting 2 weeks ago, or sorry, our CISA 4 meeting 2 weeks ago. Went over the normal types of things, the budgets and what they're doing at CISA 4 to try to help with the remote learning. And then somehow, some way, I got nominated to be part of the WASB Policy and Resolutions Committee. So I will be one of the people that comes up with that packet of resolutions that comes to our board to say if we support or if we don't support the resolutions. So,
Well, that is a benefit to them and to all of us. Thank you, Ms. Como.
Thanks. You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Korberg.
As far as the Public Education Foundation, a little update on the golf outing that was held the weekend of Labor Day. 99 golfers with a total clearing of $29,000, which is, David says it's down a little bit from the previous year, but still a very successful fundraiser considering what all happened. He says that in addition to the proceeds from the event, 4 schools shared $1,000 in prize money. 500 went to Lincoln Middle, 250 went to Logan Middle, 125 to Hamilton, and 125 to Southern Bluffs. Each for some place to benefit one school. And then this week, I'm on the grants committee, and we are currently reviewing applications for the equity, diversity, and inclusion grants. I've been reading those over, and there's a lot of good, interesting things in there that are a lot of books, but also some other kinds of workshops and sessions and things that are being requested for. I think the good thing is that the requests are coming in very close to what we can hand out. So hopefully we'll be able to fund the ones that are really top notch, and then look at the other ones that are as far as impacting other schools and other grades. I've been impressed with the fact that a number of them are district-wide. A lot of them are with all middle school ages. I mean, in middle school, like 7th grade, will cover all 7th graders. And there's even some in there that are going to be looking, covering issues of diversity with our pre-kindergarten, our four-year-olds. So a lot of good stuff in there. Hopefully we'll be able to have an announcement in a couple of weeks. That's what I have.
Thank you, Mr.
Brad.
Yeah.
Can I say something? I just want to thank Brad. We all probably got a letter in the mail from Brad, which I'm a fundraiser, and I really, really appreciated Brad's leadership on this. I thought the letter was well written. Brad, if you wanted a critique, I know you appreciate those writing critiques. It's very generous. It's very generous of you to offer the match. And I used to donate my whole school board monthly stipend to the public education fund for the random acts of kindness at the elementary school that my kids attended. And I will re-sign up and take advantage of your generous match. So thank you, Brad.
That's what it's there for.
Thank you, Mr. Korberg. All right, my announcements. So October 6th, it looks like, where did it go? Oh, my screen just blinked, I'm sorry. Is the WASB Fall Regional Meeting, Region 6, at 7 p.m. Says it's virtual only. You can attend any section, and no registration is required. And the only other thing that I wanted to say, I think Mr. Meyer kind of got me started with some thanks there, is just right before about the 3rd week of August, my family has been following safer at home orders. My sister's family had, and so we felt comfortable quarantining and then meeting up. Our kids are older, except for my niece, who is in 2nd grade, and they're in California, so school had already started. So I had the privilege of listening to online schooling for 2nd graders during the day. And at one point, I looked over at my partner and I said, man, I have had respect for teachers my whole life, but I mean, this has just completely increased the level of respect that I have for educators. He said, I was thinking the exact same thing. And so I just want to take a moment to say it is hard to be a teacher or educator, a staff member who is, away from students at the moment, but they are working so hard. I have nothing but respect for the work that they're doing and all of the different ways that they're trying to connect with their students. So just thank you to our teachers and our staff who are helping out where it's needed right now. And the board just appreciates that. And I will turn that over to Dr. Engel if he has announcements.
I would echo Dr. Cooper-Stoll's comments. I have heard so many positive things from parents about the level of education that their children are receiving. obviously most of our parents want their children back here at school, and it's really the conditions in the community that will dictate when we're able to do that. So I would encourage anyone watching tonight to please follow the recommendations of the Crosse County Health Department. Wear masks, social distance, do the right thing so that we can get our students back to school where we know most of them learn best. The only other thing I would add is that October 12th at 6 p.m. we'll have our second open forum on the topic of the school resource officers. So there'll be formal announcements put out through media and Facebook now and in the near future, but you can put that on your calendar if you did not have an opportunity to speak and would like to do so at that next opportunity. So October 12th at 6 p.m.
All right, thank you, Dr. Engel. Are there any other announcements by board members tonight?
Yes, I have a couple. I don't know if you all are keeping up with all the awesome things that are going on in the community around equity, diversity conversations. But just to throw a couple at you, one, tonight at 6 o'clock and tomorrow at 6 o'clock, there'll be a few of our students in our district actually on the news talking about their experience living and growing up in La Crosse with their parents. Their parents will also be a part of the segment, not like with their parents. But essentially, it's kind of focusing a lot on our Black youth. And then this is a partnership with the Greater La Crosse Area Diversity Council, Waking Up White, Black Leaders Acquiring Collective Knowledge, a bunch of different diversity organizations that are all a part of this effort, as well as on, I have to make sure I pulled all this up because I want to make sure I get it right. So those, again, 6 o'clock today and tomorrow, it's like a 3-minute segment, but they're looking at trying to make it a longer, not necessarily a segment, but some like video showcasing or something in the future. And then on Wednesday at 7 p.m., they have Racism in the Cooley region. And this is also, again, sponsored by, this was sponsored by the Franciscan Spirituality Center. So they've been doing various different virtual experiences with various folks in the community who talks around different topics around race, culture, diversity, equity, so on and so forth. So, excuse me, that happens, and I'll send that out to, I'll send it to Laura so she can send it out to everybody, or I can send it out to everybody, however this works. So that's happening. And then lastly, anti-racism, the La Crosse Area Viewpoint is something that's happening on October 1st at 6 p.m. to 8 o'clock. And I can remind us again at another meeting. But essentially, again, a group of various leaders in the community that's all in the social justice work and equity, having conversations and really trying to urge La Crosse and encourage La Crosse folks who are interested in anti-racism and social justice and equity work to really, start moving into action and things like that. And so just so you all know, that's going on. Then there's one more event. Sorry, I'll find it.
While Shondel's finding that information, I will remind everybody that on Tuesday the 6th at 7 o'clock is our WASB regional meeting. They suggest everybody getting together for the board, but I don't think that's probably what we'll be doing. And they said that you can log in a half an hour early in order to be able to talk to people throughout the region in our WASB. So please feel free to do that so you get your points, so you get your levels. I got my letter that I'm going to be a level 3, so yeehaw.
Thank you, Ms. Como. Mr.
I found
Simon.
it. Yep, representation matters, increasing gender diversity. And this is sponsored by our Wisconsin Revolution Lacrosse chapter, and that is Saturday at 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey. Are
No
there any other announcements by board members?
Yeah, I just want to say, so I'm not sure if everybody knows, but I was just made a new director at the YMCA here. And one of my first things that I did was open up the Prime Time Center here at the Dahl branch for some of our kids that indeed need that in-person instruction. Some of these kids didn't even know how to navigate Zoom or their iPads, right? And so I just want to shout out to our teachers. I have been in contact with them constantly, trying to figure out the logistics of things, where kids are supposed to be in their iPads, what they're supposed to be doing at 8 or 12 or 1. And it is hard because this is not what I went to school for. But I am definitely serving as of course, a mentor as I do, but a tutor now as a board member to about 15 kids at the Primetime Center, and it is some hard stuff. So I just want to give a shout out to our administration and our teachers, especially for doing what they're doing. This is very hard work in these unprecedented times, and I was a little bit under the weather today, so I was not very vocal because I felt like I have to upchuck. But I just wanted to just point that thing out. We definitely have some very, very passionate educators in our district, and they're doing all they possibly can. We're in this thing together, and we will indeed get through it.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, and congratulations. And our district and the kids are lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so agenda planning.
Is it uncommon? I guess I don't know if this is appropriate platform for this, but like if the school board was to send out like, I don't know if it's a letter of support, thanks, whatever, to the teachers in our district.
No, that's something we can certainly discuss. I would suggest that if it's something we wanted to put, we can certainly put it on the agenda as a discussion item, and that's something that we can begin via just email, getting that ball rolling.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Spivey. All right, I need a
I'd
motion.
like to make a motion to approve the October 5th, 2020 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Second.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Korberg and seconded by Mr. Turner to approve the October 5th, 2020 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections. We will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Como?
Aye.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye.
Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Ms. Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey? Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. All right, the next item on the agenda is board debriefing. I want to use this as an opportunity just to say, with the full agenda that we had for this evening, I kind of put a pin in the discussion of the governance officer discussion we had with Randy and Linda. Hadn't forgotten, but I'm just moved it to next month because we had one board meeting this month and full agenda for the night. So that's all I'll say about the debriefing piece for now. If there are any questions or whatnot, please email me. I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, but I'm going to guess, Ms. Steigerwald, that I've got the language for the closed session on the other agenda.
You have it, if you look on 13.01, it's right in the executive content.
Okay, I think I have it. Yeah, I think I have it right here. Okay, are we ready for me to read that?
I'm ready if you are.
All right. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session on Monday, September 21st, 2020, immediately following the Board of Education meeting, virtual only, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, for the purpose of considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons preliminary considerations of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where part B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problem or investigations.
One question before you go further. Should this be recorded? Because normally our closed sessions are not recorded.
Yep. So I will ask Dan Lewandowski, who is the wonderful IT guru, to stop recording as soon as we move into. So I think we could probably take a 1 to 2 minute break just so that folks can drop off of the Google Meeting. I will double check the attendance on the Google Meet, and then we can move into closed session. Yes.
Okay, so can I get a motion and a second to move into closed session?
Make a motion that we move into closed session.
Second.
Okay. Can we get a roll call, Ms. Steigerwald?
Yes. Can I? Who was seconding that?
I think Mr. Meyer might have jumped in there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Como?
Here.
Mr. Jimenez?
Aye, whatever you want.
There, yeah. Thank you. Ms. Leahy?
Aye.
Mr. Lee?
Aye.
Mr. Meyer?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Mr. Spivey?
Aye.
Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Dr. Cooper Stoll?
Aye. All right, folks, let's do about a couple minute break and we'll come right back.
The same link? Is it the same link?
Yes, please.